Hey guys, it's time to learn about some more tools in the tool chest. So we're going to learn some SQL functions that we get to use in the where clause to play around with how we filter our data using the where clause. And what we're going to use for this is the SKU data table here. So we've already learned that we can create a query to limit the data to a specific department, for example. So I can say select star from SKU data where department equals water sports. I run it, I get back the data I asked for, works like a charm. But let's try it about a buyer. So I'll do where buyer equals Nancy Myers. Run it, I get back just the records where Nancy Myers is the buyer, right? But what if I didn't just want Nancy Myers? I wanted her and, what is it, Cindy Lowe? Cindy Lowe. Well, you don't, that is possible, but you can't just do that with one condition. Well, you can, but we'll get into that later. So what we're going to learn about is how to create what we call a compound where clause, which is a where clause that contains more than one condition in it. So we've learned select star from SKU data where buyer equals Nancy Myers, and that's the exact same query we were just working with. But if I want Cindy Lowe as well, I'm going to have to work with special keywords to add on more conditions, and that is called and or. Where it goes is between conditions in the where clause. And what it does is it allows us to add more conditions to a where clause. Now, it's important that you guys understand what a condition is. We've looked at this before with a code example, but a condition in its simplest form is value 1 and then an operator like equals, greater than, less than, that sort of thing. Value 2. This is a condition in its simplest form. Value compared to another value is a single condition. Well, if I wanted to say where buyer equals Nancy Myers and the department is water sports, I can literally just tack on another new condition. This is an entire condition, so I'll just use the word and afterwards. Department equals water sports. And this is the exact same type of condition that we were working with on its own before, but now it has to be Nancy Myers and it has to be for water sports if it's going to show up in our results. Both has to be true. So I'll copy that in here, where the buyer is Nancy Myers and the department is water sports. What you talking about, Willis? Oh. Word, unfortunately, does some odd substitutions with the single quotes when you copy and paste. So you have to actually type them in to the SQL view as a single apostrophe. You can't just copy it from Word because it puts in these special characters that don't fit. So anyway, here's my corrected query. I'll run it. It's for Department of Sports and it's for Nancy Myers. Every single record I got back matches both of those conditions. And it has to because I used the and clause. And is very much like what you guys learned in programming. Both sides have to be true. The buyer has to be this and the department has to be that. Now, let's think about another example, the one I brought up at the start, where the buyer, we want Nancy Myers and we also want Cindy Lowe. So if I change this condition, I say where buyer equals Cindy Lowe, this doesn't work because, remember, in the AND clause, it has to be true for each side. So the buyer has to be Nancy Myers and the buyer has to be Cindy Lowe for the record to show up. At no point is any of these records the same value in a single record. Like this buyer is just Cindy Lowe. It's not Nancy Myers and Cindy Lowe. This condition is literally impossible to fulfill. What you want is the cases where either of those is true. It can be Nancy Myers or it could be Cindy Lowe for it to show up. And just as you just heard me say, the function we use for that is OR, where the buyer is Nancy Myers or the buyer is Cindy Lowe. If either of those are true, it'll list. So let's do that. And I'm not going to copy from Word this time. So if the record says the buyer is Nancy Myers or if the record says the buyer is Cindy Lowe, it should show up. Let's try it. Ta-da! There it is. And we could do this again if we wanted to add a third condition. Let's say we wanted Pete Hansen too. I could just add another OR and add on a third condition. Buyer equals Pete Hansen. Single quotes because this is a string, very important. Run it. There we go. So that's and an OR. That's where those go. You can fill those into your notes. Now, stick around where we learn about using the IN clause.